How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Hello, Dr. Joe.
Hello, Mark Stiles of Stiles Law. Isn't that fun?
That was nice. I didn't expect to hear my name at the beginning of the show.
You are part of the show, Mark.
I am part of the show, the
wonderful
Dr. Joe Show.
Yeah, exploring who we are and why we do what we do.
We have an awesome guest tonight, don't we?
Incredible guest.
One of the greatest human beings on the planet, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Oh, stop, guys.
Oh, no. We have here the Chief of Police in Marshfield, Phil Tavares. Chief, welcome to the Dr. Joe Show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me in tonight.
It is great having you here. And part of the reason why we have the Chief of Police here is because we have, I hate to say it, a pretty hot topic.
It is white hot, Joe.
It is. We're just going to open the discussion up, folks. We're talking about guns. Just so we can talk about guns, we have to have the discussion. Things are happening right now. They've happened before. Things may happen again. But we're going to open it up to everyone to talk about guns. Your point of view of it, it's just as important as anybody's point of view.
So, Joe, this is a really hot topic.
Yep.
Business owner like myself gets very squeamish when talking about political topics.
Why is that, Mark Stiles?
You don't. Because there are people that have very, very strong feelings one way or another on this. And I will tell you, I understand both sides. I understand you will not take this gun from me unless it is in my cold, dead hands. Yeah. I get that. And I get the other side of it, of the people who say, why do we need guns? What is the need to have these assault rifles and semi-automatic weapons and the weapons that are modified to be automatic and these bump stocks?
Bump stocks. Well,
should we talk about the bump stocks,
Well,
Joe?
you know, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I had at 5:48 this afternoon.
Should we first have Chief explain what a bump stock actually is? Because I didn't know what it was today when I was being explained.
I think that's
what was going on.
Well, I think we should bump it right over to him.
Let's go. Bump it to Chief. Chief, what's a bump stock?
Well, in relatively simple terms, it's something that can fit over the receiver of the gun in the stock and essentially turns a semi-automatic weapon into a fully automatic weapon. It allows you to fire the weapon much more rapidly.
And so the stock of a gun then is,
yes.
What part is the stock?
Well, the part that if you were going to put it up against your shoulder.
Ah.
So you pull your finger back on the trigger rather
Right.
than a semi-automatic. You're pop, 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 pop. You have to pull.
Right.
You pull it once, and it'll bump back and forth and keep shooting it like an automatic.
So it's sort of like on a cell phone, right? When you've got that function where you press down on the picture and it just like shoots hundreds of pictures all at once without anything happening.
I'm not sure I have that app, but
I have it. You're exactly
You know
right.
what I mean? And so you think you're taking one picture of someone, and the next thing you know, you've got
I
like
gotcha.
this multiple
Yeah.
that takes up all your memory.
But it cuts out the blinks.
It cuts
Right.
out the blinks.
you could pick one.
So this obviously is part of what happened in Las Vegas.
Yes, he modified his weapon with a bump stock, right, Chief?
Yes, that's my understanding. Very troubling, very disturbing.
It's that easy to do?
Yes.
Well, there's a business. There's a manufacturer that makes these bump stocks who, as of today, is probably out of business, from
You
what I
think-
understand.
Why
At
is
least in
that?
Massachusetts.
At least in Massachusetts.
And I think there's a bill on the floor in Washington, D.C. as well. So
Yep.
Massachusetts has, the Senate voted today unanimously
That's right.
to outlaw those in Massachusetts.
That's right, and I got this from Senator Patrick O'Connor this afternoon saying just that. I'm going to read it. Mass Senate just restricted the use of bump stocks in Massachusetts. It passed unanimously. First state in the nation in response to the tragedy in Las Vegas.
So that's one side of the table.
It's one side.
There's another side that is going to be very upset that happened, and they're going to say that this is an emotional decision, that people are taking a stand on it because of what happened in Las Vegas, and the NRA is not going to like the decision, and they're going to fight this pretty vigilantly.
I'm just going to ask you this, Mark, if you don't mind. Why does just talking about guns make you nervous?
It's more the hot topic. It's like religion and politics. Those aren't conversations that you're going to see me talking about publicly very often, if at all.
Mm-hmm.
Guns I see in that same realm, because there are folks that are very, very one-sided on both sides of this issue.
Yeah.
And you're going to upset one side of those people.
Yeah. And so even as a business owner, people can't separate, you think, that you do this incredible work in real estate, but because you have, you're not declaring a position, but if you declared a position, certain folks would say, I care so much about that position, I'm not going to go get my best real estate lawyer around to help me.
Maybe. So I'm not going to try to figure that out, right?
Nope.
Because it's very passionate for a lot of people, and if they think opposite of the way I think, which, quite frankly, I'm on neither side of that aisle. I've fired a weapon, but I don't own a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the need for weapons. I understand the danger of the weapons. So, but people are very passionate. I have friends, relatives, very, very passionate on opposite sides of the aisle on that one.
Chief, you got a comment on this?
Well, you can never do too much when it comes to security, and where there's a will, there's a way. They'll find a way around it, which has been done before. They'll shoot their way through it. We saw that at Sandy Hook when he shot through. The doors were locked, and he shot his way in.
Mm-hmm.
Just in Las Vegas, we saw the security guard was shot. Prior
with
to
all the cameras in Las Vegas, somebody moving all that weaponry into their room. There's a will, there's a way.
Well, go ahead, Chief.
No, I was just going to say that there's certainly, in my opinion, some types of weapons that the general public shouldn't be allowed to have. However, that being said, guns don't kill people. People kill people.
Right.
There's a seriously mentally ill person in the United States is, they say, 3 times more likely to be incarcerated than hospitalized, where they belong. They belong to, where they can be treated and helped. Again, where there's a will, there's a way. We've seen people driving vehicles through crowds of people.
Yeah.
You take, they'll just change the method to something else. And then when we adapt to that, they'll change it again. They'll change the venue to softer targets. I think it's about a number of different issues here, not just about guns.
Yep, and hopefully we'll get to some of that. So we are onto something, right? It's not just the gun; it's the person,
right?
And it implies that. See, as a psychiatrist, I am very cautious about saying that anybody who kills somebody else has got to have a mental illness, because that stigmatizes so many people with psychiatric conditions who have not a violent intent in the world, not a violent thought. But what we're really talking about is how do you determine when someone is perhaps so angry or sad or worried that they do feel a need to either protect themselves, which is one reason we have guns, or to go out and do harm.
So we started to touch on that last week when we
did.
were talking about the fellow from Las Vegas and the potential that he wasn't mentally ill.
Yeah.
Right. And that was difficult for me to get my head around, because, like many people I know, they believe that if somebody were to take somebody else's life, then something is missing in their mental health. Right? There's something potentially off. Maybe they're depressed, maybe they're schizophrenic, maybe not that, but there's something that isn't right that allows them to take that next leap where you may disagree with me that somebody perfectly sane could make that knowledgeable decision to do that.
Chief, what was on your mind?
Well, you had mentioned that you didn't want to talk about necessarily the person in Las Vegas having any type of mental illness, but if you rule out gang killings and you rule out multiple family members that are murdered, and you can't find a motive, and this person is just randomly selecting people in public, you'd have to agree that there's something wrong with his thought process.
Yeah, and I'm not disputing that part, but I'm just saying that globally, folks with psychiatric conditions should not be labeled as violent people, because
Well, no, I
many of
don't
them
think
are not.
that's what we were saying. at
I
all.
know that
Okay.
isn't, but I think that's what happens.
Yeah.
And so my profession, you see somebody who comes into a psych hospital, somebody may think, well, that would be a person that I wouldn't trust.
Right.
And that's where the stigma happens. So that's a part of the discussion, but really we're talking about guns and people's thoughts and feelings. And then, Chief, you've got some material you want to tell us. First, I didn't realize we were talking off air. I didn't realize that you could, with a parent's signature, be able to use
You can, at age 15, with a parent's signature, you can get a firearms identification card, and that would allow you to possess a firearm, a long gun or a shotgun. You could go hunting with a family member if you got a hunting license. But you have to be 21 years of age to have a license to carry, which would then allow you to carry like a handgun or a pistol or a revolver.
Mm-hmm. And what about here in Marshfield? I mean, there are numbers of people with guns in Marshfield?
There are thousands.
Thousands of people with guns in Marshfield.
Yes.
Does
Wow.
that make you nervous, Dr. Joe?
I don't know what to say to that, Mark. I mean, I'm surprised, not surprised. Is Marshfield unique in this? What about Scituate, Duxbury?
We are larger than those communities, our population.
Yeah.
So a resident is able to apply for a gun permit in the community that they live in, or somebody that owns a business in that community can apply in that community for a gun permit. So because of our size being larger than, say, Duxbury or Scituate, we're probably just by population going to have more permits than them. It is up to the discretion of each individual chief in each individual community to determine whether a person is suitable, absent any lifetime disqualifiers.
How do they make that determination?
Yeah, what's a lifetime disqualifier?
Oh, it would be like, having a conviction of a crime of violence, being convicted of a misdemeanor that has punishment of over 2 years, drug convictions.
So am I missing something in this that, let me know if this is right, that if you have like a concern about people flying on the air, right, that
Yep.
you can't, you're on a no-fly list,
Yep.
you can still get a gun. So from a middle-of-the-road point of view, not saying there should not be any guns or not saying unrestricted access, putting aside for a moment the socioeconomic components, the anger, the sense of poverty, the sense of despair, the sense of unfairness, is it okay? I mean, and the chief has just told me there how many guns now?
It's estimated there's over 300 million guns in the United States.
Okay. And there are about 300 million people. I mean, for me, that number strikes me the same way that the opioid crisis number strikes me, because that's how many pills were prescribed back in 2007. But you take a pill once, it's gone. These guns. So if there are 300 million guns, how many bullets are there?
A lot more than that.
Right.
Americans own more guns than any other citizens in any other country.
And do we have a higher crime rate than any other country?
I'm not sure. I'm not
Are we safer with this many guns?
What is the extent of the background check, and is there a waiting period in Massachusetts?
Well, if you want to start at the very beginning, in Massachusetts is one of the strictest gun laws in the country, and you need to take a safety course first prior to applying with us. Then you make an appointment with John Toomey, who's our firearms officer. When you make the appointment with him, he takes your fingerprints down, and he takes your photograph and processes your application. Then we conduct a state and local background check along with the Department of Mental Health check.
There is a mental health check. Okay.
Yes, there is. And then the fingerprints are sent to the state police for a FBI check nationwide. And when all those checks come back and everything's okay, it takes about 8 to 10 weeks for approval
8 to 10 weeks.
to get the license.
Okay.
There are no, once you have the license, if you go to a regular dealer, there is a background check, but one of the troubling areas in Massachusetts is that when private sales, I sell a gun to you or you sell one to me, there is no immediate background check right there.
Which is
But
not
yet
this-
the weapons are registered, right? So
Well,
you
you
could
would-
so if the seller of that weapon sold it to a 17-year-old kid, they'd be able to trace that through a registry, right?
Yes, as long as it was registered properly the first
yeah.
time.
So that's not quite the same thing as with cars, right? I mean, you can't sell a car
Without a title.
without a title.
Right.
There's the far side, one place, no guns ever. The other, no restrictions on guns, stuff in the middle. Off air, we were talking about how can we create a registry. Is there a registry for guns?
Yes.
So what do we have, Chief?
Well, you have to, when you purchase a weapon, you have to register it with the state.
Okay. Now, if you register a gun and you go to buy another gun, does that first gun come up on the registry?
Yes, we have access to all that.
But would you access it? Because in medicine now, we have, and some of our legislators have really done a great job on this. In order to address some of the prescription pain medications, we have access to a database that allows us to look at any individual patient and see what medications they have received over the last amount of time.
Well, where there are no, and that's very important. I agree. When we're talking about opiates and the dangers that we're facing with that, right now there are no restrictions on how many weapons somebody can collect. I mean, there's collectors that have hundreds, if not thousands, of weapons. So there are no restrictions there. Where that information would become valuable to me is if they became the subject of a restraining order, or for some reason, due to their behavior, I needed to revoke or suspend their license to carry. I would look up how many weapons they have registered to them, and I would want to make sure that I was able to account for all of those to be turned over to the police department along with their license in the event that we needed to take it away.
But is that indicative of how many weapons they actually have? Is this a voluntary registration, or is this mandated? I mean, there's not a title, there's not a piece of paper that passes hands between gun owners, is there?
Oh, yes, there is.
Okay.
But the larger problem is, and again, this isn't with the people that are lawfully
Right.
possessing these firearms, but so many people have inherited their grandfathers hunting rifles or shotguns, or somebody in the family passes away and these things get handed down and they were never registered subsequent to the act that required that. So there's lots of weapons out there that aren't registered, or if they are registered, they're registered to people that passed a long time ago.
So how does a weapon go from being lawfully registered to having it sold illegally and the registration number scratched out, and then all of a sudden it's in the...
Now, that's a serious felony, obliterating the serial numbers, but usually when they're stolen. If it's lawfully registered and there's a house break, if they're improperly secured, unfortunately if they're left somewhere and they fall into the wrong hands is when you'll see the serial numbers obliterated, and then you'll find them out on the street.
So anyone in possession of a weapon that has the obliterated registration has committed the crime,
Yeah, it's a serious felony.
if they're in possession of that weapon.
Correct.
Got it.
And in your experience in the force, have you stumbled upon guns like that have had their registration obliterated?
Yes, we have. And there's ways to bring it back. The state police lab does a fantastic job. They use acid and some other components to try to raise the numbers back up.
To figure out who sold it improperly.
Well,
or
to
who-
figure out who the last person was that owned it.
and then figure out what they did with it or what happened. Did they file a police report for having it been stolen, etc.?
Yes.
Got it.
And if you do have a firearm stolen, what
You have to
what is-
immediately report it.
you have to immediately report it. And who do you report it to?
Well, they would report it to the local police department, and we forward that off to the colonel in the state police.
Okay, so there really is this process. We have a dilemma, though, in the United States, because we have certain communities where people, innocently, recreationally, are using firearms. We have a shooting range here in Marshfield, right?
Sure.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But at what point do we say there is now a dangerous situation? Are we at that point in the United States? We've had a series of mass murders over the last decade or more. I mean, I think Columbine is probably one that everybody remembers. It started things, Sandy Hook. I mean, all of these ones. Are we in trouble? Are we doing something wrong?
Well, certainly 30 of the deadliest shootings in the United States dating back to 1947 that, have been recognized, but 17 of them have occurred in the last 10 years.
Wow.
So
Wow.
and there's a different definition by different sources on what you would consider to be a mass murder. A general definition would be the killing of 4 or more people where they select their victims randomly and they attack in a public place. And it isn't the result of, like I said earlier, like a gang shooting or, a crime of passion with family members or so on and so forth. So with
Just
that
a
definition,
random act of violence.
yes. So there has been an increase in mass shootings across our country, and it's a phenomenon just to the United States. We do have the most weapons, where there's most weapons, the most problems, but it's a significantly small number of people whose life has been taken as the result of a mass murder. Moreover, most homicides by firearms are the result of a suicide.
Yeah,
And that would bring us back to some mental health issues.
that is true. That is true. It's such a dilemma, though. So the last 10 years, 17 of them over the last 10 years.
Yes, Las Vegas. The Las Vegas attack was the deadliest shooting in modern United States history, where there was at least 58 killed. And 10 years before that, in 2007, was the Virginia Tech murders. There were 32 people murdered there, and there were a lot of lessons learned from that too about security. We can get into that later. And a year before that was the second deadliest shooting, the Orlando nightclub shooting. So, we're unfortunately hearing about these more and more often.
What do you think, Dr. Joe? What would attribute that to the last 10 years? I mean, what is going on that wasn't going on 15 or 20 years ago?
I've got some ideas on that.
Well,
Let's hear it.
Chief, let's hear your ideas.
Society has changed. I mean, our society has become more violent. Our children are
But
playing.
why?
Well, our children are playing those M-rated video games
Okay.
where they're stealing cars, they're on police pursuits, they're stabbing and shooting people, they're killing people for hours at end in a video game.
So they're numb to it.
Exactly. In addition to that, you've heard some of these rap songs and some music, and the movies and in television. I mean, there's violence everywhere, and the kids see this at an early age, and it seems to be acceptable in a way of life, and that's not a good start.
Right.
And I think that's one area where it would start.
And you have a great phrase, I understand, right, about how to begin addressing this. Is it the
Keep them in sports and out of courts.
Oh, yes.
Love
yes.
it.
Kids in sports stay out of courts, or kids in sports stay in the right courts.
Yeah, that's nice too. I mean, but it's true. I mean, there's so many ways for our kids to be engaged, to do something productive. This idea of exposure to violence, we know really that there's a lot of truth to that. We've got a lot of literature to support it. It's hard to blame the media solely for this, but there's in the newspaper business and the TV business, there's a phrase: if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
So that's what's really interesting. A long time ago, it was really important for us to be able to identify dangerous things. From an evolutionary point of view, if you did not respond to the rustling in the bush behind you, there was a good chance you were lunch, right?
Yep.
So you respond to that rustling in the bush, you run away. If you're wrong, okay, so you waste a little energy running away, but you're still alive. So we are fine-tuned to want to know about dangerous situations. But that then, I think, has escalated, where we are becoming numb to these dangerous situations, and to the point where there is one thing after the other. The other thing I get concerned about is the publicity that gets placed on
Right.
folks who have created these mass murders. And unfortunately, there are some people out there who are desperate to be recognized for anything. It
To be
doesn't it's not-
valued.
to be valued, right? It's not not mental illness. That's what people want. We simply want to feel valuable by someone else, and when we don't, all sorts of things can happen. So, one of the solutions to this isn't restricting guns. It's never giving a person a reason to use it. By reminding them always, they're pretty cool, they're valuable. You don't need to prove yourself in some way.
Some of these people don't have that friend or family member that can do that and reinforce that with them. A lot of these people are shut out on their own, or have shut people out.
Yeah, but they don't necessarily need to be. I agree with you. But that's part of what I try to do. That's part of what the I am approach, which we can talk about, is
Yeah.
all about. That people are doing the best they can. Let's try to understand why they do what they do. And I think that is part of the root of what we need to do here. It's not about restricting guns or giving free access to guns. It really is about figuring out why do people use guns? What is the situation? What is going on with them? So if there's that time where somebody in a family is so angry and outraged that they want to murder the rest of their family, I bet there are warning signs that we can pick up on that first,
I would agree with you.
early on, and do some intervention that's not punitive, that's compassionate. What's going on that you feel so desperate and so unloved and so angry that you just want to get rid of everyone? So I bet we can probably do that. Chief, we were talking a little bit off air about the things that people have learned about mass murders, but also about how we can do things,
Better.
how to address it and do things better.
Yep.
So,
Sure.
what you got?
Well, it's all about saving lives, and we've learned a lesson from each one of these. And it started with Columbine, where before what the police response would be to set up a perimeter around the school and wait for the SWAT team to go in and to handle the situation. That philosophy changed immediately after that, where police, even if you're by yourself, you might be the school resource officer, you might be the first responding officer, you're going to go in and you're going to find where the noise is coming from and you're going to eliminate the threat, even if you're by yourself or the first one or two officers that arrive. So no longer are we going to wait, because the longer you wait, the more people can be killed or injured. Additionally, we're working closer with our fire departments across the country. We're seeing paramedics wearing body armor and going in with a second team. So we'll have the contact team will go in and hunt down the active shooter, and we'll have a rescue team go in. Before, you would just have to run by or step over people that are in need of medical attention, and unfortunately they're dying right in front of the police, but they can't stop and provide medical attention. They have to go on after the active shooter. Well, we're bringing in paramedics in the second wave, even when it's still an active scene, to remove them and get them the treatment before they're left there to die. We've learned lessons from the Virginia Tech shooting, where 32 people were killed, that video surveillance and having access for the police to review that saves time. The thought at the time was that maybe that there was no way one person could have killed 32 people. There must be another person here, and they have to clear that giant building before they can let anybody go in there to potentially provide first aid. We learned that he chained the doors from the inside. 2 of the 3 doors were metal. The officers couldn't get through them. The third door was wood. They shot with the shotgun. They were able to enter that way. But officers now are carrying breacher rounds, which essentially will just blow off any lock that are on the doors.
What's a breach around then?
It has a greater impact, and it's able to penetrate with basically break the door down much easier.
Okay.
It's a different type of round. So there's lessons that we've learned, unfortunately, with these events, but each time we learn something, it's given us a better ability with our training to save lives.
So it's really creating a rapid response and then when you're in there, I mean, to get people out quicker too. You know, I'm so impressed and grateful for the courage that folks are showing, the police are showing, the first responders are showing. How do you train courage?
If you don't have courage, you shouldn't be in law enforcement. You know, it's you've heard it 100 times. When everybody's running away, you're running in, just like the fire department does. You have to have that, otherwise you're not useful for the job.
Yeah.
And that's what you get trained to do, and that's what you get paid to do, and that's what you're expected to do. And if you do anything other than that, then you need to be removed.
It's just, you know, such an amazing role that the police play, and you know, we could have a whole nother show about that. But I got to tell you, what I do, the way I try to show some gratitude to what people like you do, Chief, is if I see a policeman in a line on Starbucks, you know, and I'm right behind them, I say to the people in Starbucks, don't let that person pay for anything. I got that coffee. I got whatever it is. Because, God, you guys put your life on the line all the time.
I'm glad you said coffee and not donut, Joe.
So, yeah, you know, well, well, that's a good point. But I never know what they buy. I just pay for it, you know. But it's true, you know, firemen, everybody thanks a fireman. What's that all about?
You know, we've got a wonderful fire department here in town. We've got a great working relationship, and they save lives and they save property, and we're fortunate to have such a great department. You know, it's nice to be thanked in policing. We don't look for it. You know, there's been a movement over the last couple of years, you know, from some groups about, you know, an anti-police movement and certain things going on. But the majority of police officers are doing the right thing, and you can't judge all of them for the actions or wrongful actions of a few.
Well, I tell you, I think we've got an incredible force here in Marshfield under your leadership. You've been here for a long time, and we really appreciate the leadership of it.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to get back to the gun part just for a few more minutes. So we've come to an understanding that there are some people who absolutely don't want them, some people who do. Can we talk a little bit about that? What's your take on why people are so passionate? We talked about the middle a lot, but why do some people...
Well, you have the one side, you know, you're not going to take this gun from me unless it's in my cold, dead hands, right? So there's a lot of people in that group that are they just don't trust the government, right? So you're going to knock on my door and you're going to come in and tell me how many guns I can have? I don't think so. But then you have the folks on the other side that are saying, you know, guns cause injuries one way or another. So they're dangerous. They could get in the wrong hands. They could find their way out into the black market, into the bad guys' hands.
So we got both sides.
We have it. We have both sides.
Folks, we have had a great show, but we are out of time. That's a Dr. Joe show. Come on back next week. We don't know what we're talking about yet, but it's going to be good. Thanks.
Vincent Van Gogh cut off his ear.